Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Now would be a great time to check into your social media and be sure that your ringers are turned down as you listen to Judge Z today, and he fills us in on all the good things that are happening. Please take your phones out and take a little clip and share it with your friends and associates. In honor of Judge Z today, we have a few judges in attendance. If you're in the room, could you please stand? Jack Puffenberger, Timothy Coleman, Thomas Ossowick, Charles Sulek, James Knepp, and Jeffrey Helmick. At this time, I'd like to ask Past President Chuck Mann to the podium to deliver our reflection, lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, and give us an update on our environmental services project, Ramp It Up.
I brought a lawyer's prayer and a judge's prayer. Not knowing which one to do, it was going to be a last-minute flip of the coin. But knowing the lawyers that I do, I think the lawyers need it better than the judges. So we will read the judge's prayer. Dear Lord, as I walk this day in paths of my profession, let me be kind to those who lean on me, loyal to those who confide in me, true to those who trust me, fair to those who oppose me, and honest in every way to everyone about everything. Most of all, Lord, help me to seek justice no matter where it may lie or where that quest may lead me. Amen. Please join me as we pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, thanks to Adam Cassie. Adam's here, right? You didn't okay, good. We're all aware of the upcoming Rotary Ramp It Up on Friday, 5/5, this coming Friday. The commitment is 2.5 whole hours. 2.5 hours. It starts at 9, and you'll be done by 11:30. You will be doing your part to clean up Toledo and be a hands-on Rotarian. And you get these cool things. Cool grabby thing. A hard hat. That's probably way too big. Yeah. And sure. Let's get now.
Okay. There we go. All right.
There we go.
Now we're ready.
And wait, there's more. From a news item published in Dateline, Eugene, Oregon, and this is about 3 weeks old, and this is absolutely true because it was on the internet. I found it on the internet. A man reportedly threw a bag of cash out of a speeding car onto the interstate in Eugene, Oregon on Wednesday night. People are still searching the sides of the highway hoping to find the money, more of the money. However, police said it's all been accounted for. Oregon State Police Lieutenant Jim Andrews said anyone who stopped on the scene did a pretty good job of cleaning it up. What went out the window was $200,000. So, how many people can sign up for this? Is there a maximum with? One more incentive, if you are lucky. Yeah, if you're lucky and Fluffy isn't, you too could be a recipient of a warm fuzzy hat with real rabbit fur lining like this. There are sign-up sheets outside. I would also challenge the past presidents. If you ladies and gentlemen have nothing better to do on Friday, this would be a great time, and we can all commiserate by the side of the road. Let's see, we've got, that's all we've got. Please plan on attending. It's 2.5 hours. And we'll do some good work for, almost
might
got
need-
you
I
there.
might need
Almost
that.
nabbed it. Didn't I?
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, you're welcome. I'll clean it up.
Thank you, Chuck. I hope to see most of you out there on Friday morning. This month's meeting sponsor is Greater Toledo Community Foundation and our Rotarian, Keith Burwell. Thank you, Keith. At this time, I think for the first time that I know of, I'd like to ask our outgoing youth exchange student, Monique Harris, to come up to the podium and give us her presentation on Slovakia.
Ahoy Rotary! I'm Monique Harris, and today I will be talking about the process on how to become a youth exchange student and a little bit of the country I'm going to, Slovakia. Okay, so what is Rotary Youth Exchange? It's a student exchange program made to provide young people the opportunity to experience a cultural exchange and grow as young leaders. It's for students 15 to 19, and there is 2 types of exchanges. The short-term program, STEP, which is the short-term exchange program, where students will go for a summer and they stay with the host family in the outbound country, and then in exchange, you bring that student from the country that you went to and you let them stay with your family. And then there's the long-term exchange, which is for a whole year, and you will live in that country for a year, go to high school in that country, and stay with the host family for that entire year. The steps. So it is a very long and tedious process, starting with the application. So if you want to get a student into the program, you should contact your district, probably the president or the executive, Jackie, and you will ask them, how can you get an application? And the application usually opens in between August and September. You will fill out a lot of documents. So, it is a very long application with your medical records, getting approved from your doctor, your dentist, talking about your family, your home life, and lots of essays. You will have to get prepared for an interview, which will typically be in December, and your application should be done by then. And then you will have to attend a lot of mandatory meetings. The cost for this, it'll vary on a lot of different aspects. The first set of costs will be your trainings. So you have to put down $400 for the first training, and then for the second and third training, that's $300. And that's like for you to learn about immersion and how to be prepared to go overseas. And that also covers the blazer that you will get, as well as cards to give people and pins. Then you have your international and travel insurance, which is typically about $1K. And then you have to pay for your plane ticket, which that varies on price depending on which country you're going to. You have to have your emergency fund for that country, which ranges between $300 to $600. And then you have to get a visa, which also will vary. I think mine will be about $60, as well as obtaining a passport if you don't have one. And then you have optional extended trips. So while I'm going to Slovakia, my optional trips will be a ski trip, which will be about 3 to 5 days, and then a extended trip, which will be about 12 to 15 days to France, Vienna, Spain, and I think I'm missing one, but yeah. You guys get the point. So where am I going? Slovakia, District 2240. So Slovakia is in Central Europe. It's not Slovenia. Those are two different countries. The capital is Bratislava. It has the world's highest amount of castles. The currency is euro. It borders Austria, Czech Republic, Poland, Ukraine, and Hungary. The language is Slavic. District 2240 is Czechia and Slovakia combined, even though they are separate countries, but their districts are together. There's a total of 75 clubs. Slovakia has 28 of them. I will be staying there. I have not met my host family yet or know who I'll be staying with or my high school, but hopefully I will figure that out sometime later this month. I will be departing August 2023 and coming back July 2024. Special thank yous. Thank you, Kelly, for introducing me to this program. She's over there. We need more people like her. Thank you to my mom for supporting me through this very long process. Thank you, Cindy and Jackie, for helping me with the resources I needed and accepting me in. Thank you, Rotary Board and the district for agreeing to sponsor me. And thank you, Toledo Rotary as a whole, for the support and kindness you guys have showed me while I've been here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having me.
That was really nice, Monique. And as some of you might know, Monique is the daughter of fellow Rotarian Monique Ward. Kelly, that she was talking about, works at the Toledo Lucas County Library, and she made an introduction to Jackie and I in order to get this whole process started and has been a great mentor for Monique, so thank you. There'll be a lot more to come as we hear more about her trip and all the things that she's doing. Okay. I think next up, I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone who participated in the food pack this last Saturday. I was unable to be there, but from what I've heard from Jackie and Scott, it was a huge success, and he will be present to give us a more formal update next week. But I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot of fun was had and a lot of good was done, and thank you all for all that attended. They packed 3,500 meals in about 5 hours, so that was really good. Okay. As you probably had seen in the spoke, today we are hoping to vote on our current constitution and bylaws. So at this time, I'd like to, we have enough people in attendance between the room and in Zoom. So at this time, I'd like to see if someone could make a motion to approve the bylaws and constitution as you have read them. Carol Sobzak made a motion. Can I have a second? Alex Dew. Is there any discussion that anyone would like to have? Go ahead, Bob.
What we're about to cast a ballot on is not a copy of the Constitution and bylaws that was submitted by the Constitution Committee.
As far as I know, Bob, it was what Dick had sent following our Constitution Committee meeting.
No, there were the one I feel is farther away from, I've been on the Constitution Committee for 28 years. Every time we tried to make it closer to the Rotary International Constitution. Discretionary membership, I don't believe that did not come from the Constitution Committee, and it did not come from the Council of Past Masters as far as I know, or past presidents. So.
Well, it did not come
Who
from
can
the
explain?
board. I don't think Dick or Scott are present today, but Dick, that is the copy that Dick sent to us. Is he? I don't see. Oh, Dick, could you come up and speak? Sorry.
The process is the Constitution Committee, often from the recommendation of the board, makes recommendations to the changes for the Constitution and the bylaws. the past presidents are consulted with any changes, and they have the right to comment on them. They don't have any authority to adopt or decline them, but they put their input. The specific recommendation that Bob is referring to did come from the board, and it was actually enacted last year before the 20 under 40, I believe, to encourage them to come and be part of Rotary for a year, just on the club, basically. So that is a recommendation directly from the board that was actually implemented by the board on its own, from my understanding, and then it was proposed that it be put into the Constitution. So that's where that came from.
Okay. I think what the change is, those 20 under 40s were listed as honorary members, and we, between discussion at the Constitution Committee and at the past presidents, we thought that that needed to have its own, like, listing. Is that?
That's correct, and they're not permanent members. It's a temporary one-year trial period, if you will, to introduce them to the club, and then after a year, if they want to join, that's up to them, and they don't have any voting rights, they can't serve on boards, anything like that. It's really just to introduce them to the club.
Correct. Right. Thank you, Dick.
I don't see anything wrong with that, other than it is not in the scheme of what the Constitution Committee has been trying to do, is work the Rotary Club of Toledo closer to the suggested Constitution and bylaws of Rotary International.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that, a couple of the changes were exactly to do that. There were a couple of provisions that were in our Constitution that are recommended or suggested by Rotary International, and we did implement those changes to be closer to the international Constitution.
Thank you. Thank you both. With that discussion, I'd like to ask for a vote, taking those concerns into consideration. So all in favor of adopting the presented Constitution and bylaws, please raise your hand. All against? Okay. Yep, abstain? All right. It looks like it passes. So we will be accepting the Constitution and bylaws as is, and they were redlined in the current spoke. We'll get those updated and on the website for all of you to follow up with. Thank you. And now what we're all here for, I'd like to ask Bob Tucker to come to the podium and introduce our speakers for today.
Judge Z is here to speak today. There's no order you must obey. It's quite okay if you can't stay. And that is all I have to say.
So that's a follow-up to what we have read in the Rotary. I want you to know that the poem in the Rotary was written not just by me. It was written by artificial intelligence. And I then took the draft and I massaged it with my law clerks, and that's what you read is what we came up with. And I'm going to suggest to Bob and the program committee, artificial intelligence would be a great topic or two for several meetings, actually. And with that, I introduce my law clerk, Ben Soroka, one of my law clerks. My other law clerk is here, Zara too. Ben is going to help me get through this program in a timely fashion.
I'm just here to keep them on the rails. So, Judge, we've heard a lot of talk in the media about the importance of the rule of law in America. What exactly does that phrase mean?
Rule of law is one of my favorite three words. The other favorite three words are we the people. And rule of law, I will tell you, is something, it's probably number 2 or 3 on the list of when I talk to new citizens, why they want to become Americans. Hope and opportunity is right at the top, and the democracy is there. And they even mention rule of law, because in many countries, that is a totally foreign concept. Might a judge allow a personal preference to trump a faithful adherence to the law? It's quite something else to think that a judge should behave like that. And I would suggest to you, with the recent climate we have, that latter part seems to be a perception that people have. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But rule of self-government is what we have, and we have a rule of law, which is what judges of all levels and stripes try to follow. It's a set of principles, of ideals for ensuring an orderly and just society where everyone is treated equally under the law, everyone is held accountable under the same laws, that are clear and fair processes for enforcing the laws. That is an independent judiciary. Lady Justice is blindfolded, and that's for a reason, so that we as judges treat everyone fairly. I also have on my bench something Judge Walensky used to have on his bench. Some of you are old enough to remember him. It's a set of scales, and they are evenly balanced as a reminder that that's how I should behave. Remember that our founding fathers fought for a revolution, for the right not to be ruled by a monarch or any other unelected elite. And when I say unelected elite, that includes the judiciary.
I think most people are familiar with the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, but how do our other laws fit in?
So you can see the slide up there. The U.S. Constitution, of course, is at the top, and when I talk to new citizens, I remind them that we are bounded together, not because we are of the same ethnicity or same anything. We're bounded by a piece of paper. It's the Constitution. We as judges give an oath to that. The new citizens, likewise, give an oath to that. And so it is the most important document, in my view, in American democracy. At the federal level, we then have the federal statutes and acts. You go to the state level, we sometimes get involved with state constitutions, but my colleagues from the state court have that along with state statutes and, of course, local ordinances. So there are several levels of law. You can call it a ladder approach, with Constitution sitting at the peak.
Arguments over these laws end up in all sorts of different courts. How do we figure out where a case ends up?
That depends on the who and the what of the case, right? We have federal courts, we have state courts. In federal court, you have to have a hook. I call it a hook to get into federal court. It needs to be a case that's based on a federal statute or the law, the Constitution. Sometimes citizens of different states are allowed to bring their case in federal court. So we are what is known as a court of limited jurisdiction. We don't take anything and everything. Distinguish that with the Federal Court of Appeals. They have to take every appeal that comes up to them through the district courts. They might reject it outright, or they might have oral argument. They might write a decision that ends up in the U.S. Supreme Court. And then the U.S. Supreme Court, they get to pick and choose. About 60 cases a year is what they get to take, with hundreds, if not thousands, that are petitioned to the court. And that's a difficult task on their part, to figure out which ones they want to take for that particular term. So federal judges, we are appointed. State judges, it could be a variety of ways that you get to a state court bench. And federal judges are appointed for life, a topic I'll talk about in a little bit, subject to good behavior. I know you're looking at me wondering how I lasted this long. We'll talk about that in a bit too.
Can you explain a little bit about how judges are picked in Ohio?
In Ohio, judges are elected, and until recently, it was a totally nonpartisan election, meaning the party did not appear on the ballot. That was changed recently, and there's the map that shows where Ohio sits compared with other states. So you can see it's quite a variety of ways. Some are appointed, some are elected, some are a mix, some are elected, and they don't have to run again. They just have to be reaffirmed by a vote without an opponent the next time. So there are a lot of different ways you can get to the bench at either the federal or state level. In Ohio now, it is known as a partisan election for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. That's because they recently decided to put the party name on the ballot for those two levels of office. For the local ones, There is no party affiliation. So anyone who thinks they want to go in and pull a straight party line may have difficulty in a local election because they won't see the party on the ballot. Frankly, that's different from the way most states were going recently, until recently, and 6-year terms for the state court colleagues.
Now, at the federal level, the judiciary makes up one of the 3 branches. What sets your branch apart from the other 2?
One point before I go on, I think I want to acknowledge my state court colleagues because they handle over 90% of the cases, over 100 million a year. That's where most of the, if you want to call it, the action is at the state court level as opposed to the federal level. So, how is the judicial branch different? The judicial branch was created to be insulated, that is, protected from pressures that exist on the other branches of government. That is, the media, public opinion, influence of interest groups, and politics. One argument for life tenure is you won't bow to a particular pressure, to a particular media report, whether it's right or wrong, and so life tenure tends to enable you to be better at being fair and impartial. The structure was designed by our founding fathers to preserve the republic. They wanted limited and separated powers, checks and balances, and to prevent too much power in the hands of any one group or person. So the House, right, has the power of the purse. They control the money. The Senate, they make confirmations that the president may make, whether it be to a federal bench or another agency. And the executive, of course, has the power of the sword. Each designed on purpose by our founding fathers to make sure that power was not concentrated. Remember why we fought the revolution. King George had power to do everything, including pick those of his buddies that he wanted on the bench.
So the other branches are not insulated from public pressure like the judiciary is?
That's correct, and that's what you do, right? You go to Marcy Kaptur and you tell her what kind of action you want from her or whatever representative at a federal or state level may be. And judges are required not to bow to that pressure. In fact, nobody comes to solicit a judge, or shouldn't, frankly, on any particular case. We have to base our decisions on precedent, the Constitution, and are insulated from those type of pressures that the other branches were designed to receive.
But the judicial branch is different from those branches in that it's supposed to remain fair and impartial?
Fair and impartial is the guiding light, and you can see on the screen exactly that. There's some question today, frankly, about whether judges are being fair and impartial in their decisions. And I do want to touch on that, but not quite yet. Remember, our role is a different role under the Constitution and as envisioned by our forefathers, not to bow to any special interest or group, safeguard rights as appropriate under the Constitution. The popularity of a decision is not what guides us, and public pressure is not a factor. It's the meaning of the Constitution that we debate and discuss. It's the meaning of the statutes and the regulations and how they may apply in a particular case. I thought Justice Gorsuch said it well during his confirmation process. He said something to the effect of, show me a judge who has never disagreed with his own opinion, and I will show you someone who's not a good judge.
Why have some issues, such as abortion rights, for example, become such a problem recently?
How much time do we have? I can only touch on this because my point that I want to make is there are certain high-profile cases that get a lot of attention, and yet you don't hear or read about the other, I will say 97, 98% of the cases that we work on at the federal level that get little or no media attention. So a lot of focus is placed on the Supreme Court and then refocus on those few cases which are of, I'll call, political hotcakes. You can debate Roe versus Wade and the recent reversal. You can talk about what the Constitution may or may not say that allows it. Remember, this recent decision did reverse Roe v. Wade, but it didn't say you can't have an abortion. It said that's an issue for the particular states to decide. And that's one of the things that people of good faith, right, who have read and understand can disagree about, and disagree in a good way. Let me take this moment to tell you that I happened to be 1 week ago today at the U.S. Supreme Court listening to cases because a particular case there was of interest to me. And I was reminded, and I thought, before I have thought cameras in the courtroom are not a good idea, but maybe they are at the Supreme Court so that people can understand the process there. Remember, it's civility, civics, and collaboration, the ABA theme for this year. It's a beautiful setting. The justices were cordial. They were polite to each other. If one wanted to ask and the other one began, oh no, you go, you go. And you should also know that before each conference, these justices shake each other's hand, right? It takes a while, 9 people shaking 9 hands going around the room. I think there's a perception that some of the justices wear red robes and some of them wear blue robes. And I disagree with that. We all wear black robes, and there's a reason for that. In any event, there are landmark cases, right, that have caused a lot of controversy in the past, too. Is anyone going to argue that the Board of Education was a wrong decision? I don't think so. Keep in mind that sometimes courts make bad decisions. Sometimes Congress makes bad laws, too. Hopefully, most of the time, both branches are doing well.
So the judicial branch has a lot of impact on all of our rights. What vision did the founders have for the judiciary at the country's outset?
It was in part the protection of the minority rights. They were focused on making sure power was not concentrated to the disadvantage of the few who deserve to have a voice. And so one of the court's roles is the protection of minority rights. And of course, you see that in some of the decisions that have come down. Some rights are so fundamental that the majority should not be able to take those rights away from whether it's an individual or a minority. And I think the court has tried hard to accomplish that.
So now the question that I'm sure several members of the audience have been wondering for years, what do you actually do?
And that's a fair question, because oftentimes people will say, well, are you in the courtroom a lot? And the answer is not as much as I would like. And that's because I enjoy jury trials, and we're having fewer and fewer of those, which is a topic for another day. So my day is spent with a chamber group. I have 2 law clerks, I have a judicial assistant, and a courtroom deputy. We manage our cases. We have civil cases and criminal cases, none unlike our state court colleagues. And we work those cases, and sometimes we work to settle those cases, or we utilize mediators to settle those cases. We have hearings, we have motions. There's a whole progression of activity with the case. Because of my prior experience, when I took the bench, I determined that I was going to try and be the kind of judge that I would like to have had the opportunity to be when I was a trial lawyer. And so I've tried to mesh some of what I saw over the years, and part of that is case management, making sure that we move cases efficiently and economically. One of the things that I'm concerned about is our justice system has been excluded from a lot of people because they cannot afford a lawyer. It's like having this wonderful prize on a shelf, but you can't use it because you can't afford it. That's not good. So a lot of efforts have been made to make sure that the courts, including the federal courts, can be accessible to people. My clerks will send me memos, I will send them memos. When we're working on opinion, we go back and forth, we debate, we discuss, and we come up with the final result. So the short answer is, in state court as well, I'm sure, one size does not fit all. How we treat a case depends on a number of factors, including who the lawyers are, but we won't go there.
How do you reach your decisions, and what about precedent? Are you bound by earlier cases?
Yes, I'm bound by earlier cases, and we, of course, try to follow precedent. Sometimes precedent can be not necessarily a black and white label, and maybe there's room for flexibility or a differing opinion on it, but that's one of the matters that we do try to follow, certainly at our level, and that's the district court level. Appellate courts are easier to make law or make new law, and of course the Supreme Court is the ultimate place. I've had the privilege of serving as a visiting judge on the Court of Appeals, and it's a different experience. You're sitting with two other people, and you converse, and you talk, and you try to reach a decision on a particular case. I will tell you, when I visit other courts and work with other judges, we don't ask each other, which president appointed you? We don't talk about red and blue. We talk about the legal issues. And well over 90% of the time, we are coming to an agreement on that particular case before us. So I want you to understand that what you read about, perhaps, as this, and read these strong words and these attacks, while the public opinion polls of our other two branches are low and have been low for a few years, only until recently has the public opinion poll of the judiciary branch gone down. But the opinion poll of lawyers about the system continues to be very high as a reflection of the judges. So my message is, all may not be as it seems, what you read and what you see. What goes on, albeit quietly, behind those big buildings is working to preserve the rule of law.
Why is it so important for the court to be unbiased?
Well, you've seen some of that in recent publicity. If the public perception is that we are reaching our decisions because of politics or favor or something else, that damages what the founders wanted. It damages the independence of the judiciary. So the perception to me is very important. And in that regard, you should know that we as district judges, like the appellate judges and like the Supreme Court judges, have disclosure requirements that we're required to make. And so if I own one share of Ford Motor Company stock, I can't sit on a case with Ford Motor. Now, come on. Is one share going to really make a difference in how I rule in that case? But that's not the point. The point is perception. And so the perception has to be that there is absolutely no way that that is going to affect my decision, and you solve that problem by not sitting on that case. Sometimes I have cases where I don't have a direct conflict and I don't have to recuse myself. But I think, because of this or this, I'm going to let the lawyers know that here's a fact that I want you to know. And if you want me off this case, all you have to do is ask me to recuse, and I will. If I feel that I can be fair and impartial, and I do, I'll stay on the case. But it's up to you. And further, I don't want to know which one of you, if it's only one of you, ask me to get off the case. We'll work through the clerk's office, so I'll never know. And I've skipped right into judicial accountability. You can read John Roberts' quote up there about baseball.
So judges are pretty powerful. Are there any ways that we make sure they're accountable?
Well, I've already touched on one. We have disclosures that we're required to make. There's also a code of conduct that tells you what you should and shouldn't do, such as I can't be involved in any political campaign. I can't show a preference by putting a yard sign in front of my house for anything that might have a political taint to it. In other words, it really does force you to stand back and think on a regular basis to make sure that you are an appropriate person to hear a particular case and not show bias. That affects spouses and other family members. You may find this interesting. When I first came on the bench, I was affiliated with a law firm, the one Bob Tucker's with, RCO Law. And I came on the bench, and I had to recuse myself from all cases, not because I used to be a partner in the firm, but rather because my brother-in-law was an equity partner in the firm, and therefore he might stand to benefit by a decision that I might make. One of my daughters finished law school and joined a law firm, but she was an associate. She got a salary, I could hear cases from that law firm, as long as she wasn't on it, and they would do a Chinese wall to make sure she wasn't on it. So that's how fine-tuned the process is for a judge hearing cases and being accountable. We do have, life tenure, and we could be impeached. I'm here to tell you there have only been a handful of those since 1803, and they really don't go very far. We don't really have a good system in that regard for taking care of a judge who maybe has stayed on too long or maybe has a problem and may not be old, but may have a problem that is affecting his performance. We try to take care of that inside, if you will, internally, and we have some mechanisms for it that work to a degree. I will tell you they're not perfect, but they work to a degree. I think I want to get to that slide. So, we've had some recent attacks on judges. Let's do a little history. Hamilton and the Federalist, in one of his papers, felt permanency in judicial office was necessary. Quote, "How few there are who outlive the season of intellectual vigor," end quote. Nice quote. Well, times have changed, right? Lifetime appointments made sense, perhaps, in colonial America. I think it's time we take a look at whether that's still true. People were appointed to the bench as they were, quote, older after they had been seasoned in the law practice for a number of years. Not necessarily the case today. I could talk to you about this. When H.W. Bush was president, most of his appointments came from Democrats who retired during his term. By retired, I mean they could either retire or take senior status, which is a way you stay on, but it opens up a seat. Bill Clinton, most of the retired judges that came for appointment for him were Republican. Can you imagine that taking place today? Perhaps not. We now have fierce battles. I think this all began with Bork and his nomination to the Supreme Court. That was the first time we had a very contentious hearing. And frankly, it's gone downhill since then. We have attacks on these judges. Of course, Thomas's was not pleasant. Kavanaugh's was not pleasant. Attacks, accusations, and that's what the public saw. I read that really the public's appreciation of our court is through these now publicized nominations to the Supreme Court. And yet that isn't what it's all about. That gives you a very small slice and a very politicized slice of what's going on. I would be naive to sit here and tell you it's not politicized. It is. It has been in recent years. With Trump as president, 80% of the retirements came to him from Republicans. And so far, during Biden's term, 2/3 of the retirements that are coming to him for vacancy replacements are Democrats. And with confidence in our judiciary today at a low level, if you believe all those polls, I think we need to give some thought to that and to whether something other than life tenure is appropriate. Perhaps a term limit of 18 years would be appropriate. Remember, age is subjective. In the state court, many state courts, you have to retire between the age of 70 and 75. It's somewhat arbitrary, right? I'm sure we all know people who at 50 may not be quite with it, and at 70 are, wow, right? They're amazing. So age is somewhat arbitrary, but frankly, 18 years is a long term, and it would allow a judge to do something else if that's what he or she chose to do. I think the transparency is appropriate. I think there needs to be more education. We now have recent articles about not just Clarence Thomas, but Chief Justice Roberts and others. I did a little pecking, and it may surprise you to know that recusals some years ago exceeded or almost achieved 200 from the Supreme Court justices for financial and other reasons. This was during a time when Kagan was appointed. She had been Solicitor General, so she had worked on a lot of cases, and she had to get off those cases. But there are reasons why they get off the cases. It could be misconduct, it could be a financial interest, it could be knowledge of someone. Again, the Supreme Court columns for recusal are not just financial, there are other reasons. So, you want to talk about Clarence Thomas? Didn't report a real estate deal. Okay, he didn't report it because he lost money. Okay, that's a legitimate mistake. He made a correction to his form because he felt that one didn't really matter. Justice Ginsburg, she modified her disclosures a couple times. But you see, it happens to both parties, if you want to call it parties, and it happens over time, and there's a very selective approach to who you want to criticize in the moment. Am I saying it's right? Of course not. But amending it is certainly one way to clarify the situation. Media overload. I used to tell new citizens, you know, you have it great. In the old days, you had to wait for Paul Revere to get on the horse and tell you what was happening down the road, right? And now you have all this news, this cable news. I can't say that with a straight face anymore. I think it is more difficult now to find out what the truth is because many stations have a slant, have a bias, and it's hard, especially with the internet, with all due respect, right? There's stuff on there that's good and bad. And now we're about to get artificial intelligence, which is going to make it, in my view, perhaps even more difficult to find out what the truth is. This has always bothered me ever since I became a judge. There'd be an article in the paper, and it would say, Judge Z, appointed by, right away. And just last week, it happened again on a decision that I made, and the first thing out of the blocks is who appointed me, and the case is on appeal now and being argued, and the first thing out of the blocks on the court that's reviewing my decision, Judge so-and-so, appointed by and appointed by. This adds to the public's perception that the appointment by an R or a D is the defining factor in what a judge does, and it is quite the opposite. Civics, this is very important to me, and we have a lack of civics education here. The polls show that most of our students do not know nearly as much as our new citizens who take that citizenship exam. And most of our younger people, less than 50% could pass it today. That's concerning. That's why the court is working both at naturalization ceremonies and through the schools to help educate these young folks about these basic principles that form the foundation of our government. Politicization of appointments, I've already touched on. You know, Trump did a bad job because he politicized even more the situation, frankly. He would call them my judges, the Trump judges. Well, the Trump judges have ruled against Trump on a number of occasions. We are not the judge of any one person, president, or group. I want to emphasize to you collegiality. It's part of the cornerstone for this year's ABA theme. Civility, collegiality, and collaboration. Those three words define, frankly, what the judicial branch is doing, and it's important, and I wish our other two branches could be a little more cordial with each other. Think back to how some of our presidents worked with the members of the House in the past to get things done. Reagan and O'Neill, Obama and Boehner. We have a classic example of two judges of different judicial philosophies. Bader and Ginsburg, they were friends, Thanksgiving together, opera together. I mean, they could be civil with each other and yet disagree in a way that wasn't the way things are portrayed today. Because we have to be non-partial, and frankly, our jobs are a bit isolating at times. I think there's a perception out there that's quite contrary to the way life really is. When I took the bench, I made it a point to make sure I kept friends that were not lawyers, so that I kept my perspective of what the world was like. And having been in a prior life working with people of all walks, I felt it was important to keep that touch there. But it can be a very isolating job at times. And the one thing that bothers me probably the most about the Clarence Thomas situation is whoever dug it up disclosed the address of his mother. And I have to tell you, many judges have had death threats, and we're concerned about security at times, and it can have a difficult effect on a judge and his or her family. And of course, we have the recent example from New Jersey that dramatically reflects that. So, life tenure and term limits, I think I've said what I want to say about that. It's something we need to take a look at. We need to take a look at our disclosures, and if there's a perception that we need to do something more, maybe we should. Those are all things that I think are on the table for discussion, but I'm here to tell you that from the inside, the judiciary is working well, despite what you may read or hear. And I'm happy to take questions. Now, be kind.
Thanks, Judge, for excellent presentation. I've got a question how trees fit into this, such as NAFTA. I'm aware of a situation, not in this country, where in Mexico, where the one party lost through all the courts, so they filed a case against the government saying they didn't get a fair deal in the courts. How do treaties, NAFTA fit into this?
I can't speak specifically about NAFTA, but I will tell you one of my most interesting cases had to do with Indian rights on Lake Erie and in the Ohio waters. And we had to go through the treaties, the historical treaties, and go from one to another and decide what was kept, what was reserved, or what was given away, because they felt, those who brought the suit, felt that they had certain rights that were theirs, and that would have greatly impacted fishing rights on Lake Erie and rights along a number of Ohio waterways. Treaties are something the federal courts will examine along with the statutes and any other law that's appropriate before us. So I can't comment on NAFTA other than to say, for me personally, it's the Native American treaties that are of concern and that I've also touched on, frankly, because of some work I've done in Oklahoma and because of a decision by the Supreme Court that commented and changed the law with respect to Native Americans and the treaties in that state. So it is one of the things we work with.
First of all, it was a great presentation. I like the idea you are sitting and you are at our level.
I want to be eye level.
That was a very tactful move. I really appreciate that. My question is that at a state level, these partisan elections, Republican, Democratic, they have really become more like a party election. You know, a recent election in Wisconsin, the lady got elected, but she said, what will she decide? On her campaign, she kept on emphasizing, I'll do this, I'll do this. But my main question is that the 9 judges we have, and we have a lot of respect and care for them, but the truth is that 60% of the judges appointed, they develop a predictable voting pattern. If he's conservative, he stays conservative. There are 30 to 40% of chance, maybe barely 20 even, that he may be moderate or liberal. But somehow it's the voting pattern they develop is hard for them to deviate from that, at least my observation over the years. Because at any given time, the media says, oh, conservative judges are dominating and controlling the court. Then they say it's liberal. But I've seen very few times in the last 50 years I've been here that it was an evenly divided court, maybe just 5 years or something like that.
I think your perception is inaccurate. Yes, a judge over time will have a certain judicial philosophy that might well tell you where he will come, right? But that doesn't always hold. And are you aware of the times where, and I'll just talk about the Supreme Court for a moment, there are unanimous decisions, per curiam decisions, I've seen more of them lately, frankly, where they are unanimous in what they say and do. So it is hard to say in every case where you think a judge will come out. There's always a surprise. But I think the way the press reports it, as if it were a predictable outcome, does not happen as often as you think it does.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One last question.
Careful, Joe.
Thank you, Judge, for this wonderful presentation. We often hear the expression legislating from the bench. Now, we know there are 3 distinct branches of the government. We know judges make their decisions based on law, based on fact. So what's your thoughts about legislating from the bench? How does that happen? And
Well, that's a phrase that's used, and I don't think it happens as often as whoever uses it thinks it does. Obviously, the framers gave 3 separate branches to do their own thing. Some people think that because the legislative branch hasn't done a particularly good job of late, that the court should be stepping in and doing that, and the answer is no. It's the legislature's job, and if they can't pass something, there's nothing for us to review, right? So legislating from the branch doesn't, my view, again, all my comments are my view, doesn't happen that often, and I think it's a turn of phrase for someone who doesn't like the result of a decision and wants to put that kind of a label on it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge and Ben, for sharing your time with us today, and also Bob for his brevity and his introduction. That was great. As a thank you, I do have a gift over here for you, Judge Z, and we also will be making a donation to the Polio Plus Fund in your name.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next week, we have Marcy Captor joining us at our meeting, so I hope that all of you will be right back here in this room. And we're also going to be offering free headshots. We have a local photographer, Grant Beachy, who has decided to donate his time. So if you can be here early, I would say start getting here 11-ish, 11-ish to try to participate. We will be updating our roster. Most of you know what the roster is, and if you don't, it's a booklet or a directory of all the members, and we do put headshots in there. And since during my presidency, I have been using DACDB quite a bit, there's a lot of people in here that still look 25 in there. So it might be a good idea to get a new headshot. We have a few committee meetings today. Youth Services will be meeting in Summit A, Disability B, and Environmental in Suite C. And with that, for today, we're adjourned. Everyone have a great week.